the transformation has driven by the changes in America, or as a result of that, we see all of this these changes. But let's take a step back and talk about what led to these massive transformations. And from American point of view, they probably they were not getting good deals out with China because they have a trade deficit. But then in terms of the relations in the Middle East also, now they're like net exporter of energy themselves. So if you talk about exactly what rationale has gone into this sudden transformation, so what exactly do you think what has led to this point that they're now very rigid in their approach?
I mean, I want to clarify that, it's not just America. I think this was inevitable, right? When you have a country that is preeminent on the world stage, and then you have another country which is also massive, which has an economy that is also massive, who has technological, the moment that sets up, we've seen this historically throughout history. Any empire that sees another empire rising, there is conflict.
Right.
And some of that conflict is strategic, that let's defang them before they can do something to us. And that's part of like the arithmetic of how states view other adversaries or potential adversaries. So I think the fact that it's happened now may have been, spurred by decisions in the US or a particular president, but what has happened was inevitable.
Right.
It would have happened either 4 years later, 10 years later. It would have been spurred by X, Y, or Z. I'll give you an example. It could very well be at some point, it's highly likely that China is going to invade Taiwan.
Right.
It is not going to let go of its historical territory, even though it's a country on its own. And that could be a flashpoint for the future. That could have been the one that could have started it later on. The fact that, Russia invaded Ukraine, and very quickly, basically, apathy started with the US because they were leading a lot of the response to this. And the fact that, Europe was also fairly happy to let America take the lead on quite a bit of it. So it could have been any number of things, but it was inevitable largely because the power dynamics were changing, and that we've seen in history. It's very simple. If you look at India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, if tomorrow Bangladesh suddenly starts militarizing, suddenly becomes very prosperous, even though it's not as big as India, but India would see it as a potential adversary, a threat in the future. It's one thing, of course, that you develop, they've got historical problems. We're seeing it manifest right now. So I just think that, we can put a lot of stock in the decisions that have been taken in the past 5 years, 10 years, and say that this is what caused it. But this is probably what spurred what was going to happen anyway. And so I see a lot of this as being inevitable. And now on the question of things like the trade deficit and all that, these are things that America has become concerned with under this president. But, when you have a deficit, you're worried about partly the value of your currency, you're worried about your indigenous jobs, but, America may not have a product surplus, but it does have a services surplus. And not seeing itself as a country that does services, but it wants to have manufacturing back. That's a strategic decision.
Yeah.
But one necessarily that, is China's fault is not necessarily true. Because this is also a choice they made early on that, we would rather have design and other things here and, get cheaper product made elsewhere. And it's done at a very high level in China. And the other thing is that even though they might have that deficit, the dollar is in a very unique position around the world. Like most countries, when you think of a deficit, or when you think of, whether you have an export, import, you look at the balance of payments that happens. So let's say we take Pakistan's case. We have to earn dollars. Then we have a demand for dollars. Then that is dependent upon the demand for rupees, of which there is very low, it's only domestic. America can run a massive deficit and not lose significant value of its currency because there's demand for dollars all over the world.
And they can just print more money.
They can just print more money without having a significant issue.
Yeah.
We print more rupees, we'll have inflation. They're having inflation now for a host of reasons. But, this argument, this is sort of a much more, I'd argue, a slightly old-fashioned view of, deficits and all that for a country that is very unique in its circumstances, because its currency doesn't behave in the same way. Because look, everywhere around the world, the oil trade is denominated in dollars. There are certain countries who have effectively pegged their currency in the Middle East to the dollar. There are other countries which have a dollarized economy. Pakistan, where you look at how do you preserve capital in times of inflation, so you think of gold and dollars. So there's always going to be a demand for dollars. So I think, like, again, there is this feeling that the terms of trade between China and America were lopsided, but to view it just as a balance of payments problem is wrong, because America is very unique in a certain situation, which other countries around the world just don't have that luxury.